Welcome, it's Cassie. Recently, I posted a whole fake pumpkin pie, and I thought it would be fun today to do a fake pumpkin pie slice. And so for this one, we're going to use the Crayola air dry clay. You could probably also do this with foam clay too, but I think it's going to be less realistic looking. So, you know, I like to make everything look real. So I'm going to go with the regular air dry clay today. So condition your clay and then just roll it into a ball. And then we're going to roll this out with our rolling pin. So this will be the crust. So we want to get this nice and thin. Okay, so now I'm going to take my long clay blade and I'm going to cut across one side, across the top. And then I'm just going to pull away the extra. And then I'm going to cut down the side to make a straight edge too on each side. So I'm going to cut this. It depends how big you want your piece of pumpkin pie to be. I think I'm going to make this one a mini one. I made one that we'll be painting later and it's regular size, but I thought it'd be cute to make a mini one for my tiered tray. Okay, so now what we want to do is cut the pointy triangle shape, but I want to leave a little of this square part because that's going to be the part that folds up for the crust. Okay, so this is what it'll do. So just kind of fold that where the slanted part starts. And we're still going to make a top crust for this later, but this is just the basic bottom crust and side crust. So we'll put this aside for a little bit and we're going to make up the pumpkin filling part now. So make sure you have a nice decent sized chunk of clay because you want to make sure this has enough thickness to look like pie. So just roll it into a ball and then press it out a little bit. We're gonna roll this with our rolling pin, but not too much. We want to still have that thickness to it. So just roll it out so that you can, so that you'll be able to cut the shape out, but so that you also have enough thickness. Okay, so now I'm just gonna sit my crust on here and I'm gonna cut right around the shape so that I can get the pumpkin part the exact same size. And then just pull the crust back off. So now my pumpkin part should fit perfectly into the crust. So just make sure you get it lined up properly. And then just sit it down on there. And I'm going to press the back part of the crust up. Now I do have a little extra right here on the sides, so I'm going to take my clay blade and I'm just going to take that little piece off there. And then just make sure you have a separation between the crust and the pumpkin part, but you don't want to see really a space there, so kind of press it Okay, so now we're going to texture the sides of the pumpkin pie. So typically this will have some texture, but it's not like really deep in there. So I'm going to use a toothbrush to start and just get a little bit of texture there. And then I'm going to take a toothpick, but normally when I make texture with the toothpick, I kind of poke it in there. On this one, I'm just going to kind of move it around on the surface, kind of making lines instead of like holes. And then I don't really want to see those lines. So what I'm going to do is take my toothbrush again and just kind of texture over that. And then that should make everything kind of come together and look like a nice textured side. And be careful that you're not texturing your crust too much. So now for the top, it's usually pretty smooth. If you want to add some texture on here, you can. If you want to add some like cracks where the pumpkin pie has cracked along the edge, like happens a lot of times, you can do that. But you don't have to. It's not necessary, but if you like how that looks, you can do that. So I'm just going to leave mine like this. If you wanted to texture with your toothbrush a little bit, you can do that. Just depends on the look that you want. And so now we need to make the top part of the crust. So I'm just going to take a small piece of my clay and I'm going to roll it out into a snake. You want to make sure that it's as long as your crust there. Now what I'm going to do is just take my rolling pin and just roll it out kind of flat, not super thin or anything, just so that's about how thick mine is. And then I'm going to take a fork, and you can do any kind of fancy crust you want on this. I'm just using the fork for like that traditional kind of homemade looking pumpkin pie. So just press your fork in and make the lines. And then we're just going to put this on our pumpkin pie. So pull or cut off the edge pieces that are too long. So now I have a seam here where I've attached this, which would not normally be there on a piece of pumpkin pie. So what I'm going to do is take a pretty big ball tool, dotting tool, and I'm just going to blend in that line there with the pumpkin pie. And then I'm going to have the same thing on the back side. I have a seam here, so I'm going to do the same thing, just blend it in. And then you'll need to let this dry. I let mine dry overnight. It's not completely dry, but it's dry enough that I'll be able to paint it for this video. You might want to let yours dry a little bit longer. So for my pumpkin pie color, I'm going to use Harvest Orange to start. And then I'm going to add some Territorial Beige. Just a little bit of yellow. I'm going to mix that up and see how it looks. I think that looks pretty good. So now I want my pumpkin pie to be a little bit glossy. So I'm going to add some gloss Mod Podge to my paint mixture. And then for the base color of my crust, I'm going to use some Pale Daffodil. And then I'm going to add a little bit of Territorial Beige to that. And a little bit of Antique White. So this will just be the color we put down as the base for the crust, and then we'll still shade over that. So I'm just going to go along the edge here on my side. So paint the back side of the crust and then the top of the crust too. All right, and then we'll paint the pumpkin part. So for the top, because I want this to be really smooth, I like to use my finger instead of using a brush. That's just my preference, and well, who doesn't like finger painting? So the reason why I do this though is that the top turns out more smooth that way, so I don't have those brush strokes, so that it looks real. Okay, so now for the shading on the crust, I'm going to mix some Territorial Beige. I'm going to go a little heavier on this color than the other two, because this is kind of the same combo with a little more orange, but I want to make sure that there's a difference between the crust color and the pie color. So then I'm going to put my Harvest Orange, so probably about half of what the amount of brown I put, and then the yellow, same thing, half of the brown color. And then I just want to get most of the paint off my brush so I can dry brush this on. So I need to do the back side of the crust and the top of the crust here. And if you're painting the bottom, you would also do this on the bottom as well. Now I also want to get some just right at the very, very edge of this bottom crust. So don't paint the whole crust with this, but you don't want it to look like it's raw crust either. So that kind of gives the cooked look there. Now, you'll probably want to do 2 coats on this pumpkin pie part, because you can see it's kind of streaky, especially since I put the Mod Podge into the paint. It makes it a little bit thinner. So I'm not going to do a second coat before the next step, but you would want to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and move on though, so I can show you. We're going to do a dollop of whipped cream on here. So I have my piping bag, and I have a 1M piping tip. I'm just gonna put my piping tip into my bag and then just cut a line right below where the openings are on the tip, and then I can just snip that part off. And then my tip fits right in there. I'm gonna put some lightweight spackling into my piping bag. This one I have is very white, so I don't need to do anything to it. But if yours is kind of grayish, add some white acrylic paint to it and it'll brighten it right up. You want to make sure it's the consistency of whipped cream or like buttercream frosting, or even the frosting in a can, so that you get it to come out properly. So if yours is thicker, kind of looks dry, you would want to add a little bit of water, just a tiny bit at a time, and just, you know, stir it around and then see if you need to add more. If it's too wet, it falls flat. If it's too dry, it just doesn't look like it's supposed to. It's hard to get the shape that you want. So I'm just pressing it all the way down into my tip, and then I'm just gonna do a quick little dollop here. And there's your pumpkin pie. Now, I would eat the whole thing covered in whipped cream myself, but let me know, would that be enough whipped cream on your pumpkin pie for you? Let me know in the comments. All right, so that's all there is to it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.